Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's webinar, Your Roadmap from MSP to MSSP, Avoiding Speed Bumps and Accelerating Success. My name is Luis Giraldo. I'm the VP of Strategy here at IT Glue, and we're pleased to welcome you today to this wonderful webinar. We hope you will have a lot of useful ideas and content out of this presentation today, and we're happy to welcome our special guests from Nitsurian, who I'll be introducing shortly. Guy, if we can move on to the next slide. And one more. All right, so a little bit of housekeeping for everybody this morning. We do have Zoom controls available to you. So you'll see a Q&A button. This is the button you should use for questions that you'd like to ask of us, the panelists, or of our presenter. And we'll also be sharing some useful links and information throughout the presentation in the chat box. But do be sure to use the Q&A box specifically for questions, as it's the best way to also engage with other attendees regarding questions. And we will be sharing a $100 Amazon gift card, or raffling off a $100 gift card for those who stay through the end. So do stick around. As usual, we are recording this webinar and we'll be sharing it in a follow-up email to all those who registered for the webinar. Coming up in September of 2020, we have our annual conference, GlueX, in Phoenix, Arizona. This is the best pricing you'll see for the conference pretty much all year at $299, and it's a fantastic thought leadership focused and business building focused conference that we hope everybody is considering attending to make sure that you're growing your business and continuing to work on the things that are key drivers of the industry. So definitely visit us at gluex.co and have a look at those super early bird tickets. And with that, I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Guy Cunningham. How are you? Good morning.
I'm doing well. Thanks, Luis. Good morning to you.
It's so great to have you finally on one of our webinars. It's been fantastic collaborating with you and your team on getting this presentation ready. And I was just thinking back earlier on how we met. You know, you guys, you and Anant over at Event Tracker and Nitsurian, we sort of hooked up one of the conferences in the fall of 2018, which was kind of the start to sort of a little bit of a beautiful friendship between the companies, and working on a special project which we hope to announce a little bit later in the presentation this morning.
Yeah, we monopolized quite a bit of your time during those couple of days, so I appreciate it.
No, it's all good. It's always a pleasure to work with talented people, especially in industry that is so key to the MSPs that we work with, and so this is what brings us to this presentation today.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your team and have this conversation, and looking forward to a long and fruitful partnership. Alrighty. Well, today's agenda is we're going to talk about how to migrate from just a regular old MSP to providing MSSP capabilities. You know, what that roadmap looks like, and that's been the topic du jour for, it feels like, the last couple of years. And so we'll talk about the advanced threats that are popping up, susceptible to you and your customers, how to avoid some of the speed bumps that you can encounter along the way, a couple of tips that may help accelerate that transition, and then a little bit of a discussion about how to team up with some experts in this arena to continue that process for your organization. The first thing that I really wanted to talk about, and this has been popping up with a lot of my conversations with MSPs over the past, probably the last 18 months, and that, you know, we've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity. Virtually every conference that I've attended over the last 24 months has had cybersecurity at front and center. And as I've been thinking about this, it's not really anything new. Cybersecurity has always been core to what an MSP provides to its customers. But back in the day, it wasn't the same kind of cybersecurity. We were satisfied with making sure that the systems were backed up, that patches were applied, that the domain was managed accurately from a user ID and password. People weren't left on the domain controller after they left the organization, and that a traditional firewall was in place, and we protected the organization from, hackers who were actively trying to get in. On one side note, I think there are plenty of statistics out there that show that if patches were applied religiously as soon as they were released, that would eliminate about 80 to 85% of breaches. And we all know that it's not practical and sometimes not even possible to manage patches to that level of granularity, but it does speak to the fact that part of what an MSP does on a day-to-day basis outside of the advanced quote-unquote cybersecurity realm still is really focused on security. And so the change over the last probably 5 years has come about because of just the rapid rise in technology available to the cyber criminal. And it's very easy to create malware today. There are literally kits available that you can download for less than $100. It'll create malware. And then, always the weak link in the chain has been the end user. So as much as you can put infrastructure in place, firewalls, IDS, IPS, threat intelligence, et cetera, the end user is going to find a way to mess that up for you.
I guess that kind of speaks a bit to layers in the security approach as well, doesn't it? And one of the things I've noticed with that layered approach is that I guess you mentioned it yourself just a few seconds ago. The security thing has been front and center the last couple of years. But as an MSP myself, one of the things I noticed that many MSPs have been sort of bolting security or the additional security they feel is complementing the gap on top of their core offering, but not moving the security piece to the bottom of the pyramid, if you will. It's still not quite core in many cases. And so that sort of seems to be the transition that a lot of MSPs are going through.
I would completely agree with you. I think the recognition is there that it needs to be part of the core offering, but how do you move your customers into that same mindset? I think that's where we find a lot of our MSP partners sitting today. They know that they need to do this, but how do they get their customers to sign on board as well? So, this year's been kind of rough for MSPs. I think at one of the last conferences that I was at, one of the speakers shared from the podium that over 300 MSPs have been breached this year, 2019. And that's not an MSP's customer has been breached. That's the actual MSP being breached. And what we're seeing is an acceleration of hackers' focus and intent of breaking into the MSP, because they know that if they can crack into the MSP, then they have, for all intents and purposes, unfettered access to the MSP's customers. So it's not just about protecting your customers, it's also about protecting yourself as an MSP. And Operation Cloud Hopper is a little box down here in the bottom that really is, it's a state-backed hacking organization that is targeting MSPs. And that's been on the radar of the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI for 3 or 4 years at a minimum. And so there's a lot of focus out there to try and break into the MSP and not just figure out how to break into the small business being served by the MSP. And so some of the numbers are interesting. Still, RDP is the #1 threat vector. So, I would encourage you to go in and make sure that you're accurately and consistently managing RDP controls. What we found recently is that 25% of firms that experienced a cyber breach ended up shutting the doors down afterwards. So it's not just paying a ransom or restoring a server. Sometimes quarter of the time it actually is detrimental to the entire organization. So it's really, really important. And just to give you an example about these criminals not just targeting your customers, but one of the examples that MSSP Alert produced was that an MSP had to pay $150,000 in ransom to a hacker. And that doesn't even speak to the ransoms that the customers probably had to pay. And frankly, from a business perspective, it's super important. if one of your customers gets breached on your watch, then the chance of them churning out and moving to another provider, 3 out of 4 of those customers that experience a breach will move on. So the more we can do to protect you and to protect your customers, the less churn you're going to have, and the more you can solidify that relationship with your end user customers.
I find that that's true even in no matter what kind of waivers of liability you have with the customer, because sometimes customers are not necessarily signing on to some of the security initiatives, and they don't feel that they're at risk. It's the same conversation that is going on for the last couple of years. It's like SMBs just don't feel like they're the threat, they're not the target, and so like, oh, we don't feel like it's a priority to spend money on this MFA initiative or this other thing, and in some cases MSPs get those customers to sign liability waivers. I still find that helps zero in preventing the churn of the customer when they do get breached. But and so it's an interesting conversation that seems to be changing the positioning and the posture of that security to be more the core service and not a negotiable item. I definitely see that trend now.
I would agree with you. You had two comments in there. The first is that the customers don't feel like they're a target, and that's really just, that's part wishful thinking and just part ignorance. They're not a target in the sense that a hacker's specifically going after this individual small business, but they're just kind of getting caught up in the net as the hackers and cyber criminals are scanning the internet for vulnerabilities that they can find using automated tools. The other comment that you made is about the liability. We're seeing a lot of our MSPs, especially towards the end of 2019 and as they plan for 2020, making advanced cybersecurity core to their offering, and that somebody has to opt out of that. So if they can't convince the customer to sign on for the additional layers and the additional processes, putting that liability release form in front of them. And if nothing else, it'll cause them a little bit of a pause, give you an opportunity to start that conversation from a different perspective, to give you a chance to encourage them one last time to take advantage of those layers of protection.
Yeah, and Dan in the chat is commenting that the liability waiver is sort of a sales tool to some degree, and that's true because it just makes the customer realize that it is in fact a serious conversation, and that it wasn't just sort of a posturing thing that the MSP is trying to do to sell them more things, but rather it's a critical thing that the MSP has a black and white opinion about. And so we have a polling question that we're going to kick off here because we're curious to know sort of where people sit in this spectrum of whether you're offering advanced prevention and detection services in your current stack.
Yeah, and really the focus is on the detection and response. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but not just advanced endpoint protection, but the advanced detection and response capabilities.
We'll give people a few more seconds here to finish responding. We have about just about 60% of folks have responded. There we go. A few straggler votes coming in. We'll give it maybe 5-10 more seconds and close off the poll and show the results. There we go. So yeah, about 58% of folks responded with a yes, that they do offer advanced prevention, detection, and response solutions today, and 42% answered with a no. Now, Guy, let me ask you. Yeah, do you find that that most people are that you agree with what people think is an advanced prevention, detection, and response solution, or do you find that there's maybe a misunderstanding of what that should be considered from a core services standpoint?
Yeah, that is the question, really, isn't it? Is what is the definition of detection and response? So the vast majority of people that we talk to, and maybe it's a result of them not having a detection and response solution in place, they're trying to find one. But the vast majority of people that we talk to, whether it's in sales conversations or at the various trade shows that we're at, they are looking for a solution to fill that gap. So That's interesting to me. So, you know, we can talk about what Shireen's definition of detection and response is in a little bit later, here in another couple of slides.
Sounds good.
So, you know, at the end of the day, it's really, really important for MSPs to come up with a solid plan for cybersecurity, right? The landscape is just too confusing. There's more than 1,000 different vendors that all end up sounding a lot alike, right? We're all using similar acronyms, saying that we're doing similar things, and it's really hard, especially for an end user, for your customer, to try and sort through all of that and figure out what they really need and can afford. And so that's really why they're turning to you, the MSP. And you know, your technical focus on this, as well as your ability to operationalize these tools on behalf of your customer, is really, really important. But even saying that, MSPs are in a tough spot when it relates to cybersecurity, because the skills shortage is becoming increasingly apparent. I can't remember the exact date, but there is a forecast of negative employment, negative unemployment in the cybersecurity space. I think the prediction is about 3 million unfilled cybersecurity positions in the next 2 to 3 years. And you know, for most of the MSPs here, I would venture that they would feel like they are a small business alongside of their customer's small business. And finding qualified cybersecurity professionals, being able to afford them, number one, and then being able to keep them, number two, and you know, number three, keeping enough of them on staff is really, really difficult, and it's going to continue to get more difficult. And so that's why, you know, finding partners who can help you fill those gaps, people that are dedicated to those areas that you need, I think is super beneficial. So get started, right? It's not easy, number one. It's going to get more difficult, number two. The threats are real. So what we'd like to do now is talk about you know, some of the options that you have, right? You know, you guys are technical. You're smart people. You manage technology every single day on behalf of your customers, and so what we find is a lot of MSPs, not necessarily a majority, but a significant percentage, have the perspective that I can do that myself. I've got access to tools that would allow me to do that myself. But before we jump into that, let's talk about the pathway that we see customers and MSPs accepting this and internalizing this and understanding it, right? And we really suggest thinking about cybersecurity as in a similar fashion as the way you think about protecting your house or your home security, right? Back in late 2018, we started socializing the whole you know, protect your house concept. And it really starts with a NIST cybersecurity framework. So even if your customer's not susceptible to or required to have NIST compliance, the NIST cybersecurity framework is really helpful, and we're starting to see a lot of understanding being generated from the use of this framework. So there's really 5 pillars that are represented by this graphic on the right side of the screen. And they start with identify, and I think a majority of MSPs are performing the identify functions, and that's, you know, vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, scans of the network, those kinds of things. And it really helps generate a conversation with the customer to let them know these are the gaps in your current infrastructure. The next step is putting tool. Go ahead, Luis.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you how, you know, you guys are obviously very close to a lot of these frameworks, and I'm curious to know how much you think the end customers are being socialized to things like the NIST frameworks and whatnot. And because obviously an MSP can talk about these things, and in most cases it'll be no different than most other technical mumbo jumbo to them potentially, and so they just want to know they're secure, but there's, you know, that's very broad strokes obviously. So I'm curious how much you feel that NIST is being socialized with end customers these days.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and my gut is telling me that it's probably not being socialized as much as it should, and my impression is that there's a fear of confusing the customer by using too many acronyms, and so I wouldn't necessarily go in and talk to the customer about, hey, we need to walk you through the NIST cybersecurity framework, but instead just tell the customer these are the areas in which we are committed to protecting you, and there's 5 areas that we need to make sure that your computer systems are covered, and we'll talk to you to explain to you each of the technologies that reside inside of those 5 areas.
Yeah, I like that. Sort of a go-to-market cybersecurity plan, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, you can personalize it. You don't have to use the NIST. I was at a conference where somebody from I can't remember the name of the agency, but they produce all of this documentation, and they're like, just take it, right? This is your taxpayer dollars producing materials for you to use. Plagiarize it, put your name on it, take our name off of it, doesn't matter, but leverage the research and the materials that have been produced to help you have this conversation with your customer. Mm-hmm. I'll get up on a whiteboard and I'll draw out these 5 columns, and then I'll talk about the types of solutions that fall within each of those as a way just to visualize and not use scary acronyms or compliance regulations as the flood factor, but just kind of coach and educate the customer about it. So most of the MSPs are doing the identify portion of this. Whether you do it regularly or not, or just as a way to start a conversation with a prospect, I would encourage you to at least annually, if not quarterly, go through some of those identify steps. And then putting a firewall in place, putting some sort of endpoint protection, whether it's anti-malware or antivirus in place, is part of that protect. Intrusion prevention systems are part of the protect. But then we get into kind of the holes in this framework that most SMBs and frankly many MSPs are not thorough in yet, haven't completed their research yet, and that's in the detect and respond. And the way that we think about detect and respond is, if somebody wants to kick open the door of your house, even though you've locked the door and even though you've got an alarm on the door, if they want to kick the door open, they can probably do it. And that's the way the cybersecurity world really is. If somebody wants to get into the network, they'll find a way to do it, whether you've got a firewall or antivirus or endpoint protection in place or not. And so you need some sort of tool, some sort of mechanism, some process to be able to detect when that happens, because it's going to happen. In fact, I was just in a meeting yesterday with a pretty large hosting company that has 8 data centers scattered around the eastern half of the U.S. And he was talking about the Ohio Data Protection Act. And essentially the state of Ohio, the legislature acknowledged that even though you're spending a lot of money on cybersecurity, you can't prevent somebody from getting into your network if they want to get in. And so what the Ohio Data Protection Act essentially says is, if you as a customer, as a business, have demonstrated that you've done the things that you need to do, that you've completed these 5 frameworks, that you're using the NIST framework, you're using the SANS Institute controls, or you're using an ISO framework, if you've done that and somebody still gets in, then your liability to your customers or to your business partners is eliminated or significantly reduced. So it's all about demonstration of intent to protect the data.
And we're starting to see this with lots of other states, like California has their data protection regulation now as well. And I think this will be a trend that continues. But even on the insurance front, this year was the first year that on the renewal of the insurance or cyber liability and errors and omissions insurance from my MSP, that we got an actual managed services provider writer from the insurance company to fill out very specific information about how we're managing our security. Because, these are things that from an insurance coverage perspective, you may get denied a claim because you didn't have enough effort or, best foot forward kind of thing to avoid some of these things. And so we were asked questions that went as deep as like, hey, or what is your RMM tool of choice? How are you protecting that? Do you have single sign-on? Do you have multi-factor authentication? And I was honestly surprised because it's the first time I'd seen it in an insurance questionnaire for renewal, but it kind of speaks to where the industry is going with all this and how much we need to be doing to basically at the core or first foundational cornerstone of our offering to even be able to play the game, right? So.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is just a start. I foresee all of the insurance companies and all of the states passing similar requirements. So this is definitely the start of a trend. So just to round this out, in addition to being able to detect when somebody gets in past your traditional defenses, you also need the ability to respond. And from our perspective, that is not just recognizing that it happened, but understanding what needs to be done to fix it and prevent it from happening again. And then obviously, worst case scenario, you need to recover. And that's really where your backups come in. Being able to re-image the machine or restore data that's been compromised is part of that fifth element of that framework. And that's, the reason we put this as a circle is it's a cycle, right? You don't just do it once and then you're done. You have to constantly do this. You got to do this 24/7. And for most MSPs, doing this 24/7 with dedicated staff is difficult, if not impossible. And that's really why NetSurian has been around, as we're supporting MSPs in this effort. So I mentioned protecting your business like your house, right? So there's the prevent, detect, and respond. I think virtually every MSP in existence is doing the prevent stuff really well, right? It's managing passwords, it's patching software, it's AV, endpoint protection firewall, and then cybersecurity awareness training, right? I don't know of any MSPs that's not doing that. But these additional layers of detect, collecting logs, reviewing those logs, correlating those logs against threat intelligence, looking for patterns of behavior across endpoints and across customers, having some sort of intrusion detection in place. Those are complicated types of solutions and require vigilance 24/7. And then finally, the response. How do you automate the response if something is detected? They got past the AV. AV is not going to kill it. So how do you kill it? How do you clean it up? How do you go back in time to review how somebody breached it so that you can figure where the hole is and fill that hole and make sure that those holes don't exist elsewhere? So having somebody looking at that as some sort of a security operations center, looking at that 24/7 is really, really important. So I would say most MSPs are probably in the 1.0 or 2.0 column here. Everybody, I would hope, has the intent of getting to the 3.0, if not in totality for their customers, at least for themselves and for those customers that they can convince to take the extra steps. But, the comprehensive cybersecurity is the goal. And there's a lot that's involved, right? It takes infrastructure, it takes tools, it takes process, it takes people, and it's something that you can't go from 1.0 to 3.0 and this click of a button or a snap of your fingers. It takes a plan, and it takes partners, to be honest with you. So just to give you kind of a couple examples, right? Talking about the DIY, do-it-yourself kind of mentality. Virtually everything that an MSP does could be done DIY. You could build everything from scratch. You're using IT Glue, right? IT Glue is a great tool, and they've solved a ton of problems, made it very easy for an MSP to manage documentation. But if you wanted to do it manually, there are tools out there that you could buy and put in place, but it's not going to be as effective. It's not going to be as efficient, and it's not going to be, it's going to be a lot more costly because of the various tools, infrastructure, and people that are involved and the amount of time that it takes. Same thing with backups, right? I used to work for Veritas, and we sold, Net Backup and Backup Exec, and worked with, Iron Mountain and tape archival companies and big storage arrays and disk and tape libraries. So you can manage backups on your own, but the tools available to MSPs nowadays, the snapshots, the images, the copies out to the cloud, the ability to restore with a click of a button, it's so much easier today if you partner with somebody that specializes in that. Help desk is another example, right? You can hire all your help desk staff, train them up, promote them from level 1 to level 2, level 3. If you're starting out as an MSP, that's a costly and difficult process to get started. So we're seeing a ton of outsourced help desk companies, help desk and NOC companies that are there to either help you get started in that process or to help you grow your business without having to hire additional people to fund and facilitate that growth. And over the last couple of years, we've seen a number of threat monitoring solutions, co-managed or managed advanced threat protection, detection, and response solutions out there. You could build it yourself. You could collect all the logs. You could download the open source elk stack and program all of your alerts and your actions and reporting and all that. But that's a full-time job in and of itself, just keeping the tool productive as opposed to responding to the alerts, et cetera. So that's why we're seeing so many co-managed solutions come into the market like Event Tracker.
The comment I have on the threat monitoring as well is that I think a lot of MSPs sort of in the path to sort of starting to do some of this work, they still have to deal with the help desk piece, which is the part it's is easy to forget. It's like, oh, great, we're going to take on this initiative. We're going to start doing, hey, we're going to download the Elk stuff, get it all up running in Azure or on-prem or whatever. But it's still a very reactive type of work, because ultimately those engineers are also still being escalated all the other kinds of tickets, whether it's the not working printer or some of the stuff that just makes you scratch your head. It's like, okay, we're trying to deploy this like cutting edge security initiative, and we still have people dealing with password resets and printers, and it can be very frustrating to sort of get to that next level, and kind of speaks to the MSP 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 journey. It can take years before you have, hopefully you have no turnover in your staff, because otherwise every time that happens, you're also starting from scratch. And so, really, how do you deploy stability to an initiative of this nature? And that's, I totally agree that there's an opportunity to ramp up this with an outsourced partner for sure.
At least to help you get started, but what we're seeing is that, once you incorporate that partner, that managed solution into your business process, just most of the time until you reach a certain threshold, it makes sense to just grow with that partner. So really, the message here is you don't have to go it alone, whether it's with us or with somebody else. You've got partners out there that can help you accelerate that journey to move from the MSP to the MSSP. And the way that Shurian manages that relationship is, we handle all of that cybersecurity stuff, and we support the MSP. So the MSP is still primary on customer relationship management, making sure that endpoint protection and the firewalls are in place, that they do the traditional backup patching, and the work inside of the network to fix and remediate anything. But your managed service partner, your managed security service partner, will handle the grunt work associated with sorting through all of those logs, collecting and retaining the logs, detecting stuff that gets past the traditional defenses and providing you intelligence about what to do about it. Interfacing with your ticketing system so that when a priority 1 event happens, it immediately shows up on your dashboard. Staffing the SOC, creating run books and incident response playbooks, and then producing the reporting for you. The output that you use internally or that you present to your customer to show what happened, and then ultimately, if they are audited for any reason, to hand to the auditor in support of all the work that you've done. So there's a lot to being an MSSP that finding a good partner can help you fill in the gaps and get there a lot more rapidly. So we got another poll here. And it kind of goes up with Luis's earlier comment, and that how many full-time security experts do you have on staff? And that's people that are just dedicated to cybersecurity, in a quote-unquote SOC capacity.
And I might add that this is not your guy that knows how to set up VPN tunnels with Juniper firewalls. This is a guy
Right.
that's truly doing, or a gal obviously, that's doing the deeper threat detection, the managing the initiative, how the MSP responds to some of these things. Mm. Do you find that there's some misconception again here about what full-time security means in this context? In this context, Guy?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's not just, do you have somebody that's on staff full-time that knows about security, or maybe is responsible for security, but is actually working on security, both in a reactive perspective. Hey, something happened, I need to work with my help desk and tell them what happened so they can go fix it, but also in a proactive stance, right? Most MSPs, most customers never get to the point where they are able to dedicate people even part-time, let alone full-time, to a proactive cybersecurity posture. And that's really, if you're talking about MSP 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, getting to the point where you've got people that are not just responding to security events, but are thinking proactively, thinking strategically on behalf of and with your customers to put plans in place to mitigate the possibility of a breach, not just responding to those breaches that do happen.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I think everybody responded. Here are the results. And one thing I'll comment as people are looking at these results is, an MSP that I happen to know of, Greystone Technology in Denver. Peter Melby, the CEO there, is a guy that I've had a chance to hang out with a little bit at some of the events. And one of the things he did that I thought was really interesting, and he's shared some of this stuff publicly, but he put together an interesting sort of security initiative grid, if you will. So imagine a bunch of squares. On one axis is the amount of effort required for that specific initiative. On the other axis is the cost to deploy that initiative. And so even as far as opening the door for having the conversation, I found that this, it's just a simple PDF file that lists all the security initiatives on the left. And there are things like, hey, roll out MFA, put two-factor authentication on Office 365, or turn on log detection. There's a number of things on the list. And so he grades them by difficulty and cost. It's just a great way to say to the customer, okay, well, I understand cost is a concern here. Let's look at some of the things that are less expensive, perhaps, but quite effective or very impactful in increasing the security posture of the company. And let's sort of chase after those. And it kind of creates a little bit of a security roadmap, because one of the things that happens, like with any conversation, is as soon as the customer has been mentioned the things that they should be doing that they're perhaps choosing not to, the little thought in the back of their head remains as to, hey, maybe we should do that. It is important. It's weighing on me a little bit. Let's revisit doing that next quarter or sooner, that kind of thing. So I'll see if I can, while we're chatting here, find a link to that security thing that Peter did, and I'll share it in the chat, because I found it was quite interesting and a great way to open the door to the conversation. So is this result, are these results surprising to you at all, Guy? 65% have no dedicated security experts?
No, not at all. I think it's just the reality of the environment, the availability of resources, and frankly, the size of the companies that MSPs are running, right? This guy that I was talking to yesterday, this hosting company, right? He ran the math, and he said, in order for us to stand up a true SOC, we had to hire a minimum of 5 to 7 people. We had to put all the infrastructure in place, the real estate, the data center infrastructure, compute, storage, networking, the tools, the platforms, build all the integrations, et cetera. He calculated that its people costs were going to be over $1 million, and that the total cost just to get set up was over $2.5 million. And that's before $1 of revenue came in, out of that initiative. And so it's just difficult, right? It's cost prohibitive for most businesses, for most MSPs. And that's why I strongly encourage everybody to take a serious look at some sort of managed service. We'd love to be part of that conversation, but if you've already got a managed service in place, great.
Now, there was a comment in the Q&A about, those questions kind of not necessarily addressing the potential for an MSP that already has an outsourced SIM or SOC partner. And so we do apologize for that. I think we're kind of focusing on the MSPs that maybe don't have a SIM or SOC partner today, but who are maybe trying to have a go at this type of journey and either trying to bring people internally struggling, getting full-time security experts on board, or who are already maybe a 10, 15% MSP and still not able to dedicate a full-time security expert on their staff to these initiatives. So thanks for the clarification. I think that maybe we could have clarified better.
Definitely. Well, Luis, you kind of hinted at this earlier in the discussion, but we're announcing the actual integration between Event Tracker, our cybersecurity information and event management platform, and IT Glue. So really what this is going to allow MSPs to do is the reporting that we produce, the security reports, the customer value reports, and then also any compliance reports that the system produces will automatically integrate with and load into the IT Glue environment. And so it gives you a single place to review that documentation. And if you choose to make it available to your customers through your IT Glue platform, great. If you decide not to, that's totally up to you. But it really helps integrate the security data with all the other data about your customers' environments. So we're really pleased to see the efforts that the development teams have put in place to come to fruition.
Yeah, this was really a labor of love, I will say. Congrats to you guys for really pulling this out, because we started chatting about this in the fall of 2018, and Ananth and you were quite passionate about sort of seeing this to fruition, and it's been a great experience on both sides. I had the chance to work closely with your development team on kind of architecting how this data would look like and feel like in the IT Glue side, and it's great to see this kind of project come to light, and I can't wait for some of the Netsurian and Event Tracker customers to start using this for sure. Thanks for all that great work.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for feedback, and it's an iterative process, right? So we'll continue to make the integration better over time, and we're looking for partners to take advantage of it and let us know how it's working and what we can improve. All right, well, we're kind of wrapping up here, and so what Netsurian wanted to do is, as a way to thank everybody for participating, is we've got a special offer that we'd like to put out there. When an MSP signs up with us as a result of this show or this webinar, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to double the number of internal use licenses that we provide to our partners, and we help our MSP partners protect their own infrastructure first, right? As part of a partnership, they get internal use, not for resale licenses, that they can deploy on any of their assets. And so we're going to double that number to 200 internal use licenses. And then on top of that, we're going to discount our program fee by $100 a month. And so hopefully that will encourage MSPs that are thinking about this type of solution to jump in and A, start protecting your own infrastructure, but B, realize some savings on that. And the way that our program is structured, that $100 a month savings actually is effectively a discount on the stuff that you deploy out to your customers. So it's it's going to help make it as easy as possible for you to get started. Not just rolling this out internally, but rolling it out to your customers.
Yeah, on that, using the NFR keys for internal use, I wanted to sort of get your temperature on how much do you find MSPs are dogfooding the solutions that they're deploying to customers. Because it's surprising to me to still hear of how many MSPs are not using, even simple things like MFA or single sign-on for their critical tools like RMM or PSA or other things that contain critical data. And so I imagine that potentially sort of goes downstream to other things like security and whatnot. Do you feel that MSPs are sort of transitioning to really dogfooding these services and solutions internally first?
Oh, I certainly hope so. And part of our onboarding process is, step one is, we don't want to wait for a customer, right? Step one is, let's get this deployed internally. And it's surprising the number of times that an MSP in that first 30 days of onboarding, with our solution, it's agent-based, right? So we just push out agents onto the infrastructure, the servers, the workstations. We point firewall syslogs to the system, and literally you're up and running in 30 minutes to an hour. It's very easy to get deployed. And the number of times that we find stuff going on inside of the MSP's environment is it's shocking sometimes, but it's also gratifying to know that we're able to plug those holes immediately for our partners. And so they get familiar with it, looking at their own data, and then that helps them articulate the value proposition and demonstrate the solution to their customers whenever they're out in those face-to-face conversations with their customers.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point of, the MSPs that find stuff going on in their own environment. I guess there's always that question about transparency and accountability. I might actually get you to move on to the next slide, because we have a couple of those links available there while we chat about stuff. That's kind of opens the door for a little Q&A here as well. But so I wanted to sort of get your feel again also on sort of this idea of transparency and accountability, because I find that there seems to be this undercurrent of commentary going on that is, are you really supposed to be your own MSSP when you're providing this to your customers as a service? Are you going to have the right level of accountability and transparency in delivering this kind of service? Like, can you choke your own throat when something goes wrong? What's your thought on that?
Well, it's hard. I mean, most enterprise organizations, the SOC and the NOC don't report into each other. It's the chicken and the fox kind of thing, the hen house and the fox, right? So I think there's a lot of legitimacy to that, having some third party kind of watching over the MSP's shoulder to make sure that everything is hunky-dory, right? One of our partners, we were on site going through the installation of their internal use licenses, and we don't have to be on site. It was just part of that sales process. We were there, and immediately we found an open RDP port, and the CEO of the company kind of looked over his shoulder and yelled across the office to the guy who was responsible for that particular customer's firewall and said, what's up? Like, oh, I just forgot to close that port. I was doing something in their environment, right? And, you mentioned it earlier, most MSP's techs are responding to tickets all day long, right? And they're moving from task to task, and sometimes things get missed, right? Closing the loop on shutting stuff down gets missed. And so having somebody or some process that watches over that to audit it and look over shoulders can certainly be beneficial.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the integration. Definitely, if there are folks here on the call today that are IT Glue customers and you're curious about this, definitely reach out to Niturian, Event Tracker, or even your IT Glue account manager will get you connected to the right people to have a look or attend a demo and see how that integration works. Another question I have for you is about pricing, and may not be the right place given that each MSP's solution could be unique, but somebody mentioned it in the Q&A. What are some of the price ranges that an MSP could expect for a solution like this, or is that better discussed offline with an account rep?
We can certainly talk about the specifics with the account rep, but I'll kind of tell you the starting point, right? If we've got an MSP that comes in and, they want to try out the solution, they're not going to commit to any volume, then our starting price point, kind of our MSRP cost to the MSP is, there's two data points. There's the core infrastructure, what we call core devices. It's the servers, domain controller, firewall, those kind of assets as critical assets. That starts at $40 a month. And that includes the software, the platform, the threat intelligence, the hosting, the compute, the storage, log retention for a year, and includes our SOC services. So it's an all-inclusive price. And then workstations, laptops, desktops, point of sale systems, kiosks, those kinds of things start at $3 a month. But you know, we've got a tiered solution so that as our MSPs grow their infrastructure with us, grow the number of devices that are being protected, you know, that goes down pretty substantially, pretty quickly. So, you know, on average per device, you know, if you take all the critical devices and workstations in a customer's environment, typically starts around $7 to $8 a month. And then we've got some MSPs that are, you know, 10, 15,000 devices that are, you know, in the $3, $4, $5 a month.
That's awesome. That's actually quite approachable from a, you know, let's get started with this. Let's try it with this one customer that has this concern, or, you know, a lot of MSPs have varying sizes of customers, and there's definitely some with more complexity, more concerns, perhaps a few that have specific compliance regulation requirements. So it sounds like a super easy way to get started. That's awesome information. Guy, well, this has been very enlightening. I appreciate your knowledge and thoughtfulness on this topic. We have a couple of links here up on the screen for you guys to check out the MSSP roadmap, itglue.com/MSSP roadmap, nitsurian.com/itglue-ultimate-protection for some webinar specials. So check those out. Once again, thank you so much for being here today. And behind the scenes, we have a whole crew of people that have been helping out with the content and with the logistics of delivering a great presentation today. So thank you to all those folks, Paula, Aaron, David, Carlos, and again to you, Guy. Thank you so much for being here.
Our pleasure. Thanks for giving us the opportunity. And we're thankful for your partnership on the integration and just the opportunity to share this message with your customers.
Right on. And for everybody else attending, please look forward to our email follow-up later today with a link to the recording. Thank you so much for attending. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and have a good one. Take care.